So what I think we're getting wrong, and it's not unique to multifamily, is that we're spending too much time talking about hype and not enough time talking about real world implementation of solutions that are solving problems. Like AI for AI's sake is the worst reason to implement AI internally or externally.
Okay, that's really interesting because you just described what I think is one of the most underutilized area of AI in multifamily. Welcome to another episode of the Apartment Jedi. Today, my guest is Jacob Carter, founder and CEO of NurtureBoss. NurtureBoss focuses on delivering conversational AI capabilities to the rental housing space, so it really shouldn't surprise anyone that our conversation focused on, what else, AI in the rental housing space. But this is not a sponsored episode. In fact, we barely talked at all about NurtureBoss itself. Instead, our conversation was really around what are we getting wrong with AI in multifamily, where we should and shouldn't be leveraging it, how it can get better at selecting AI partners, and what aspects of the businesses are being underserved right now, and how Agentic AI will, but isn't quite yet, changing the game. I particularly like this take on specialized microagents operating under a single orchestration layer to see the bigger picture. And although that's not a reality today, that approach, I think, has the opportunity to revolutionize the way we operate rental housing and leverage these tools to maximize performance. You definitely do not want to miss that part. But that's enough for the intro. Let's get talking with Jacob Carter of NurtureBoss. So Jacob, I appreciate you coming on here with me and being one of the inaugural guests of this podcast. So first and foremost, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. I am excited to be here and excited to be one of the inaugural guests as well.
Yeah, so it's funny. I broke out kind of on my own, and which means I get to talk about just about whatever I want, which is kind of a real fun freedom. Even though I've been like a revenue management guy and a business intelligence guy and all these things for years, one of the things that is absolutely fascinating to me in the world of multifamily right now is the emergence of artificial intelligence. And before everyone cringes at those words, because everybody's using them.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to explore with you is some of the ways that you guys are using it today at NurtureBoss, but also some of the ways that we think we can probably bring a lot more to multifamily in various different ways. But I'm going to start with the assumption that all of our listeners are not intimately familiar with NurtureBoss. So give us a little bit about your background and NurtureBoss, which hopefully will paint the picture as to why I want to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I've been a software engineer for a little over 15 years now. So my whole professional career, I worked in various tech companies, typically in the marketing space though. So
Okay.
MarTech or marketing technology. And, the lens that I look through is kind of shaped by that experience. And NurtureBoss, we focus on conversational AI for multifamily, and I can get into more detail on what that looks like and what that means. I'm sure that we will throughout the conversation.
Yeah.
But just a little bit of background of kind of why we exist and NurtureBoss came to be. My experience in multifamily actually comes from the renter side, right? Not from working on site or being involved in operations or marketing or anything like that. And for better or worse, because I'm a software engineer, I think technology solves all problems. So when I was experiencing or not experiencing, the reality that I wanted as a renter, I set out to start building technology to create that experience that I felt like, renters should have and deserve to have. Now, obviously, as I've gotten into the space, been doing it for a little more than 5.5 years now, multifamily through and through. I've spent a lot of time, on site, shoulder to shoulder with assistant managers, leasing agents, and the amount of empathy I have for how difficult that job is and the amount of hats that they wear, that is a huge driver of the tools and features that we build today, but originally did kind of approach it from the renter side of wanting a different experience.
Well, that's actually one of my favorite things about the way AI is helping progress the industry. Because unlike you, where you came at it from a renter perspective, I wasn't born into multifamily, but I mean, I started my multifamily journey when I was 18. So it's really all I've known professionally. And I've actually really enjoyed the shift from it's operator driven to now it's, especially with AI, especially the AI world that you're living in, it really is renter driven. It is how do they want to react? What's the experience they want to have, and how do we build towards that? Not necessarily the way we've always done it, like multifamily was famous for before this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I'm sure behind that. Obviously, in the past few years, the supply boom with multifamily has been huge, and the more choices renters have, the more that dynamic switches to really the renters drive the ship versus the other way around.
Well, yeah, and again, I think a lot of operators have realized that their competition isn't necessarily the guy across the street, especially in the buying experience. Their competition is Amazon. Their
Mm-hmm.
competition is booking a hotel room at Marriott where it's just smooth and seamless, and you're not going through all the steps that we have to go through in the multifamily side. But since you guys are on the conversational side of AI, let's go ahead and start there. And you mentioned that you had a background in MarTech, essentially. I've got real questions about where SEO and GEO are heading at this
Sure.
point. Like I've heard a lot of different conversations, and I had one earlier in this podcast with Mike Whaling where we really kind of went back to, is content becoming king again when it comes to the GEO side of the equation? You know, I like to pick on the people who put on the TDLR, too long didn't read. See, I don't even know what I do, TLDR. I love to write. I love to do long form. Is that? I'm of the opinion that if we've always been doing these short little snippets, it's been great for the human in SEO, but is it really going to work for GEO? So I'd love to get your commentary and thought on that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So it depends is my answer. But to go into more detail,
Yeah.
the one of the things that I like to keep front of mind when we think about GEO and changes that we want to make to how we show up on the internet to serve GEO is you don't want to basically sacrifice the experience that folks actually have when they're on your property website, for example, just so that you can rank better on GEO, right? So we're at a point now where we're still in single digits for the percent of searches that are coming through ChatGPT, for example, instead of Google. So
Yeah.
Google is not dead, SEO is not dead, and people visiting your property website is not dead. But we are transitioning, and I think we all agree we'll continue to transition where more and more of the content is served up through ChatGPTs, Anthropics, Perplexities, things of this nature, and less actual traffic to your website. So we do want to create that content that serves us well for GEO and ranking well with the LLMs, but we don't want to throw away the user experience. So I think the TLDR still serves a purpose. I think it still provides value, but it certainly shouldn't be the only thing there. By adding that robust content that is conversational in tone, factual, authoritative, kind of long form like you're referring to, that is going to allow you to rank better with the LLMs and provide value, but we just don't want to get away rid of the things that we know users also are looking for when they visit our websites or other internet stops.
So then how knowing that we're early in this transition you just described, we're still single digits for searches, leveraging ChatGPT in this world. But we know it's going to grow, and we'll get into a conversation around agents and stuff down the road a little bit. But how would you advise organizations today to evaluate an AI platform as it's going into this? Because again, we're living in kind of two different worlds right now. How would you advise people to kind of structure and think about, should we or shouldn't we, when it comes to decisions like should we focus on SEO versus GEO? And I realize that's not necessarily an AI conversation, but
Right.
where would you guide people on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, most people will tell you, I'm curious, I'm sure Mike said this as well, that the the best foundation for good GEO is great SEO, right? So like that's step one, is to have a really good SEO foundation built out, and you build your GEO on top of that. So it is not a one or the other. You don't have to pick one, right? And as you're building the GEO on top of that, the low-hanging fruit and easy stuff that we should do right away are the things that don't affect the end user experience. This is things like adding structured data like JSON LD or RFDA, or we can get into the weeds on that, but the stuff that is invisible on the website effectively but is read and analyzed by the large language models, that's some low-hanging fruit. Let's just get that stuff on our website now. Let's do a really good job at it, because it doesn't affect the end user, but it will allow us to appear better and more frequently in ChatGPT and the other LLMs of the world. Now, then when it comes to the content side, there are some really natural, organic ways to add great content to your website that does not harm your SEO and does boost your GEO, like great QA sessions or sections or FAQ sections on your webpage. So it's a really a great way to create the environment or opportunity to have the long form content on your website, right? In a section that makes sense visually if you're there navigating the site, but also provides a ton of value to the large language models crawling your website.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting as you said that. I just was picturing all the conversations have been over years of doing this, of all the boring stuff that no one wanted to put on a website because nobody wants to read all of that is exactly what the large language models absolutely devour and take in, if I'm
That's right.
hearing you correctly.
Yeah, that's right. And so put it on there, but make it where, it's not the only thing on there. You still have the TLDR, right? But then you also have the long form content as well.
It's backed by the privacy policy that has to be there, but nobody's actually going to link to
Right.
it. Got it.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so bring this back towards the AI side of it. You have maybe not a unique position, but an interesting position to look into the industry. One of the things about multifamily that traditionally has been true that I don't think is as true as it was 5-10 years ago. Traditionally, we were 10 to 15 years behind from a technology perspective, if I'm being respectful on that number.
Sure.
And I'll give Tyler Christiansen with Funnel full credit for this. I was on a panel with him, and he brought up the fact, like, okay, multifamily is closer to the cutting edge than we've ever been because of just the push of especially the conversational large language models that we're seeing from the leasing perspective. But because it's such a new space for multifamily, one of the worries that I have is we just simply don't know how to evaluate this space. We don't have the expertise on our teams outside of the really large data shops that have, and I guess more and more multifamilies are bringing folks in like data scientists and that type of thing to be able to bring kind of more the neural networks and things involved with it. But how as a person in this space who's in the AI space, especially the communication space, day in, day out, if you were evaluating a platform, how would you evaluate it? And what would be the things that you would want to make sure you'd see in that evaluation?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first step here to be successful is to break this into two categories, which is your internal tooling versus your external tooling. So NurtureBoss is in the external category. A multifamily operator is going to bring NurtureBoss on to communicate, function, and operate externally from their team, meaning we're interfacing with prospects, with residents, right? Then you have your internal tooling. These are the tools, the AI tools that you provide your team with, either at the on-site level, the corporate level, whatever it might be, to make them better and more efficient at their jobs. And if you're trying to use the same criteria to gauge the effectiveness of internal and external tools, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? So you got to find the right success metrics depending on the situation that you're rolling that tool out. Now, the external side, I think, is probably easier to measure. How do you know if NurtureBoss or the like is doing a good job and it was a good spend of your budget? Well, because we're doing the work that typically an on-site team member would do, you can hold us to the same accountability metrics and standards that you would an on-site team member, right? So we can look at things like, are follow-ups happening? Is our lead to tour ratios within the bounds of what we find acceptable, right? Are we able to surface insight and data around what lead sources perform to inform our marketing spend? What's our resident retention rate? What's our on-time rent payment rate, right? How do our online reviews look? Is it going up, down? So this is a lot easier and easy to check that box. I think where it gets complicated and a lot of people are not doing well, not just in multifamily, but everywhere, is that internal tooling of AI. And is that doing a good job or not? I don't know if you saw MIT just put a study out that said 95% of AI implementation at businesses is failing. And that's what it's referring to. It's referring to that internal tooling implementation, right? Of saying your job's either going to get easier or straight up be replaced because of this AI agent that we brought into our team. And turns out that that's not actually happening.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Jensen Huang. For those not familiar, CEO of NVIDIA, his quote that basically says, AI is not coming for your job. The guy who knows how to use AI is coming for your job, which kind of speaks to that internal push you put in there. But you said something when you were talking about the externals that I want to dig into just a little bit, because I think there is, at least I've had a misconception around this, and I don't think I'm alone in it, is you were mentioning that you could measure the effectiveness and the efficacy of the external AI the same way you're measuring your people today. I think there's an expectation that because we're utilizing an AI to do these different tasks, that it should be better, it should be more efficient. So the same range that we measure people on needs to be moved when we're measuring the AI. For example, you said, lead to tour ratio. Well, if the classic lead to tour ratio is 10 to 1, the machine should be able to deliver a 5-to-1 ratio. Is that a complete fallacy, or is that some? And by the way, I'm using random numbers in there, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
is that shift just a complete fallacy and misunderstanding of what the tools are designed and capable for, or should we be expecting both free up our people to do what really matters to them, which I want to get into with you,
Mhm.
as well as hey, we just do it better than people do.
Yeah. So I think that it is okay to say that I expect AI to do it better than a person does. I think that it is not okay to arbitrarily decide what better looks like, and then hold AI to that standard, saying if my lead to tour ratio is 22%, AI should have it at 42%. Because at the end of the day, when you shop for apartments, you're not going to live everywhere that you enter your lead data into, right? Like renters
Right.
are going to say no. And there's just bounds there of where we're held to, of you can only do so good. So what I would say is, yeah, I think that expectation is fair. What I think is that we're too early in the phase to know what is that other number, right? So I think the starting place is to say, I certainly shouldn't be performing worse with an AI agent in place. That's a given. I know I should be performing incrementally better because I have an AI agent in place. How better is that? And I think it's the job of companies like NurtureBoss and others to be transparent with what we're seeing, the impact that we're making, to help set what that bar is. But yeah, I do think it is generally fair to say I expect better performance out of my AI agents than I do my human agents.
So it's both the efficacy and the freeing the time of the groups where the value is really delivered, if I heard you correctly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you can get into like tangential topics there of, well, we want to move towards centralization, so and this is going to help me do that. Or, there's other kind of unique ways that different management companies with different strategies are going to measure that success. But yeah, definitely both.
Well, you actually okay. So I'm glad you brought up the C word in that the centralization, and
Yeah,
I pretty much call it specialization because the models are usually completely decentralized, but that's a whole nother story.
sure.
But one of the ones that I've heard a lot of great things about, and I've been hearing about it for a couple years now, and I know that NurtureBoss has a component that does this, is the delinquency in the collections
Mhm.
large language models. So talk to us just a little bit, since you talked about okay, what are the right expectations for the incremental increases we should see, and if this is an unfair question, please tell me. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on okay, what would be the incremental increase we would see on effectiveness on, let's say, a leasing LLM versus one that is designed for the collections and debt, which again fascinates me because it I used to be a community manager, used to be an assistant community manager. I know what it's like to go knock on doors. I know what it's like to pick up the phone and ask people for money that they owe you. By the end of the month, you are so tired of it that you have
Yeah.
zero empathy left. Large language models never run out of empathy. They
Mhm.
always are that. So I'm curious. So when you think about what's that incremental increase between those two, is it fair to juxtapose those two as like you could have different expectations, number one, and number two, what would those kind of expectations be?
Yeah, so yes, it's fair, and I'll elaborate on kind of why I think it's fair. I think the expectation, I mean, certainly a double-digit percentage increase in your ability to collect debt, I think is fair.
Wow.
It's meaning so that's pretty meaningful impact, right?
Yeah.
That you're going to drive there, and the reason is a couple things. One, like you said, with an AI agent, you can guarantee that 100% of overdue residents are being communicated with, reached out to, and pinged in a way to help collect that. You can't guarantee that when the assistant manager is in charge of it, right? They have so many other things they're working on. Oftentimes, there's not a great way to track who they have and haven't reached out to. There's a lot of spreadsheets and notepads on desks, that are trying to help organize all of this. So just the fact that you can guarantee 100% communication rate gives you a boost right away. And on top of that, you can guarantee X number of continued follow-ups or outreaches. X is going to be dependent upon what you're comfortable with as a management company, but obviously the AI agent is capable as many as you want. So not only are you guaranteeing 100%, but continued consistent outreach, right, to help collect that. And then furthermore is the ability to 24/7 have the back and forth. So maybe they have questions about why the balance is what it is, right? Or maybe there's special circumstances and you need to get payment plans set up or get promises to pay set up, right? These are all things that the AI agent can facilitate and help with. So I do think that that is a good example to say, yeah, no, we expect a noticeable increase in difference when you roll out AI agent to facilitate delinquency and rent payments.
Okay, so you brought up another AI buzzword in there, and that's agents, and everyone's talking about agentic AI now at this
Yeah.
point. Um, this is something that's it's I've been going down a bunch of rabbit holes on this one, and one of those rabbit holes was a podcast that you actually did with Mike Brewer.
Yeah.
At the time of this recording, a couple of weeks ago at this point, and you said something on there that I had not thought of. I've thought a lot about the fact that we think about agentic AI and multifamily from our perspective, meaning I'm going to be able to go to my source property management system, talk into a microphone, interface and say, "Hey, move Mrs. Smith in," and she's going to do all the things. Or an agent is, a leasing agent, meaning a LLM leasing agent, is going to be able to book the tour and do all the things and have those different items. I think it's going to be really interesting when the prospects also have their own agents that are doing everything, and suddenly it's not human to agent, it's agent to agent. But where I wanted to go with what you said, because I hadn't given this any consideration, is I've always thought of these as being omni agents, basically something that's a secondary personality to me that will do things for me. You have a different take on where you think it will go. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so the phrase, until I come up with a better one, that I've been using to describe it is microagents. And a really brief explanation is that inherently the way large language models work, at least today, is that the more you want them to be good at a lot of things, the less good they will be at each of those things. So if you want your LLM or the agent that you build on top of an LLM, said is a better way to say it, to be hyper focused and really talented at a specific task, don't ask it to do other things. Train it and mold it to be really good at that thing. So now what you end up with is an agent that is really good at booking tours, an agent that is really good at collecting overdue rent payments, an agent that is really good at serving maintenance requests, an agent that is really good at monitoring the water usage at the property. I mean, the examples can get crazy. And then you're piecing these micro agents together over an orchestration layer that is the intelligence that knows how these agents work together, how they share data, information, how they speak to each other. And what this allows you to do in our very specific example of an apartment community is an operator at that community, you get to build the agent or the AI machine that does what you need it to do. You don't have to buy bloated software that has a bunch of functionality you don't care about, right? You get to kind of plug and play the micro agents that serve you and your purpose into this orchestration layer. And then you, as the buyer of that software, have a single interface, that orchestration layer that you interact with. You don't need to understand there's 100 micro agents underneath there, right? That's the orchestration layer's job to worry about that. So from your perspective, it's basically like that team member or teammate that is just really good at all these different things and is able to contextualize itself and serve your needs and accomplish the tasks that you set out for it.
Okay, that's really interesting because you just described what I think is one of the most underutilized area of AI and multifamily, and that's asset management. And that orchestration layer, I think, was the piece I was missing in that explanation, because that to me, that's the area that we haven't gotten to yet, which is being able to basically dump an asset manager or regional manager's brain and the way they think about an asset and the way, I'll just say the 4Ps, the product, the promotion, the people, and the price interact and work together and identify based on all these, as you were describing, I'm like these siloed agents, but the reality is that orchestration layer breaks the silos and gives you that upper level. That's super interesting.
Yeah. And I think, just to be clear, I don't think this is the future of AI and multifamily. I think this is the future of widespread adoption of AI, is our ability to get out of just creating a GPT that does this one thing for us, or just asking ChatGPT to rewrite this email for us, and we're actually creating these personas, these life collaborators, right? This giant agent that works with us, that is an expert with these hundreds of modular agents underneath, right? That are built, set up, and linked in with all the things we need it to be linked in. So, if we were to break away from multifamily and talk about you as a person, and you want this super agent collaborator, you need to give it access to your calendar, to your email inbox, the ability to send text messages. It's going to need your credit card information so it can pay for your prescription, right? So that's that modular hookup I'm talking about.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because that is exactly the way that I've challenged a couple folks in the multifamily side to think about the prospects agent. Because when ChatGPT first came out, one of the first things I did was like, okay, I'm a software engineer in Richardson, Texas. I just got out of college. I'm working at such and such an address. Where should I live? Like that was the prompt I put in, and it returned. I mean, at the time that was still not real time data, so it was 3 years old as far as
Right.
the properties that were in there. But it returned four different options for me. I tried it the other day, and now I basically said, based on what you know about me, where should I live in North Texas? And it started to go into all the different ways that I have, I'm using the tool, everything from we're family estate planning to like health stuff out of it. And it literally was coming down to like, well, we think these three probably are the best match for you. So that's where I say like the prospect side of the business, when more and more people start to really leverage these tools and it starts to think not just, hey, I want to live in this area, but I want to live in this area and have the lifestyle that you think I would want based on our interactions because I'm doing everything through you, is going to be a real game changer, which, not to bring the thing full circle, really brings you back to GEO and understanding what are the avatars you really want to go after at your site.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to highlight the importance there is generations continue to grow and come up and evolve. More and more of the generations coming are going to be using ChatGPT to run their life. So the context that it has to what makes sense for them will be massively accurate, right? And trusted above all else, as opposed to for the folks that are still using ChatGPT like Google, right? So, well, I might ask ChatGPT how much Benadryl I can safely take. An 18-year-old is going to ask ChatGPT, hey, I got accepted to these 3 colleges. My girlfriend's going to be going to this college, and I care about her a lot, but I really want to focus on my career. I don't know what decision to make. Help me, right? Like that's how Gen Z's talking to Chat, and it's not how boomers are talking to Chat. So it's really changing how much context it's going to have about everyone's life.
Well, as the son of boomers, and my in-laws are boomers, I can tell you boomers are not using it really at all, unfortunately.
Right, right,
Which is
yeah,
very different than my Gen Z sons and
yeah.
how they're interacting with it. Okay, so let's kind of bring back to the multifamily side, because I know, again, I have a very big heart for all of my multifamily owners and operators out there trying to wade into this world, because we have gone from, I used to joke about 5 years ago that if anybody put a chart or a new dashboard in their system, they had AI. Now the reality is a lot of them really do have artificial intelligence of various different types, whether again it's neural nets or large language models, or even a lot of machine learning is still that way. How would you recommend, as essentially as an AI company, again, a focused AI, how would you recommend companies evaluate AI within a platform? And then let's take that to the next level of like, not just like evaluate who we should work with or consider working with. And then let's take that to the pilot phase of like, okay, great. I'm not going to say head. I've selected a technology that I think is going to work. I don't want to put it across my entire portfolio all at the same time because I want to proof point that.
Yeah.
What in your opinion looks like a successful one of those?
Yeah, good question. So I think this is a really, really good question. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, to the point where I was actually getting frustrated on LinkedIn because I would see AI companies say, check out this insight into how this customer of ours ran an AI pilot to determine the best solution. You click on the link and it's an advertisement. It's a sales pitch of how they chose them because they're so great. And I said, screw this. And I sat down and I just nonstop just type. And I ended up making a guide to run an AI pilot that is completely objective. It doesn't mention my company, right? It doesn't talk about why we're better than our competitor. It's just an objective guide on how to run an AI pilot. You can get it for free on our website, not to go promote, but I think this is an important question that we should be talking about more. And step one of that guide is verifying that you indeed have a problem that needs to be solved, right? Like AI for AI's sake is the worst reason to implement AI internally or externally, right? So that's step number one, is do you actually have a problem that needs solving? And then is there solutions out there that leverage AI that could solve said problem? So I would say that's the very first thing to do. I'm happy to go through like kind of a quick overview of that whole process.
Please. I think, yeah.
So, and actually, let me, I'll pull it up on my screen just so that I have it. But there's,
And by the way, we'll link it in the show notes too, and there'll be I'll put a little banner. Well, everybody's seeing the little banner of what the link is right now, so where they can go see it. So,
right, right. Okay, great. So yeah, that's kind of the first piece that I have in there is, do you really need a virtual leasing assistant in this example, but do you actually really need AI? The next one is, we already kind of talked about this, which is identify what success looks like. So
yeah,
you need to know how you're going to measure success before you even start doing the thing. Right. So if you, in fact, have identified a real pain point you have, then you know what resolution of that pain point looks like. So are you set up to measure the resolution of that pain point? Do you know when the problem has been solved? Not only do you know what the numbers are of what success looks like, but also, do you have the tooling, software, whatever it might be, in place so that you can indeed measure that, right? And know if the thing that you have rolled out has worked. Now, so you have a pain point, you know how you're going to measure if you've solved it or not. So now you need to start doing your research to find potential AI partners. So do your own research first, right? Google, use ChatGPT, talk to your peers, go on LinkedIn, figure out what other folks are using or what is out there that could potentially solve your problem. Once you've done that, I think the next best thing, before you haven't even talked to a software vendor yet, right? You're not even doing demos. You're not even, having sales calls, is you get internal buy-in. So you need to make sure that if you, in fact, identify the right solution and you want to pull the trigger on it, are you capable of doing that? Do you have the budget to buy it? Is the decision makers at the company going to sign the contract, right? Do you have the bandwidth internally to train your staff on how to use that new product?
that's such a big one right there. I'm so glad that's in your list. Is the bandwidth and be able to manage the change in these organizations? Because what I've seen over and over and over again is someone on an executive level gets really excited about something. Maybe it's a pet project, but the adoption is terrible because the teams have no bandwidth and don't see the same value. So I'm super glad to hear that in your framework.
Yeah, that's a super important one. So now you've identified, you have a pain point. You're set up to measure, the success of solving that pain point. You've done some research to help identify what potential partners are out there, and you know that if you find somebody, you have all the tools internally, the buy-in internally to do it. So now, literally halfway through this process, you're now ready to start talking to potential AI providers or software that you're thinking about purchasing. Now, I think the biggest mistake that people do here is they hold is software buyers don't hold cards close to your chest. Tell the person that you're buying software from exactly what you need, exactly what pain points you're trying to solve. Be completely transparent, because it's going to allow them to speak to your specific pain points and how their solution can or can't solve that specific pain point, right? Like, this isn't
Yeah.
a game of cat and mouse here, right? Like, you should look at your software you're buying from folks as a collaborative partnership, a relationship, right? Not like a catch me if you can sort of a thing. So be open and transparent. Let them know the problems you're trying to solve and how you're going to measure if you have solved those problems.
Awesome. I love that framework.
Yeah, and there's a few other ones in there, but that's the gist of it. And if someone's curious, they can take a look.
And again, they can get that on your website, and we'll also have it in the show notes with the link here. So, we've been going for about half an hour now, and I'm always conscious of time on this. So I kind of want to finish with two more additional questions, and then I'll let it open up to whatever you want. One of the things that I've been kind of on a soapbox myself about, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. One of the things that I believe large language models are actually getting pretty good at is developing a relationship with the prospect on the other end. I've heard multiple stories of operators who said, their large language model is called Lucy, and when people come to the property, they're asking, "Is Lucy here today?"
Yeah.
Multiple times. What I haven't heard, and again, you're much deeper in this than I am, what I haven't heard is really a focus on those large language models helping to build community. Now, they free up the site teams to be able to do that. But in my mind, the way I define community is, relationship 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are all now intertwined with each other on that. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any progress towards that end where, for lack of a better term, your leasing model also becomes kind of a dating service model once they're actually residents and connecting people?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is no. It's really interesting. I hadn't thought about this, deeply. prior, so I'm having a lot of fresh thoughts right now. But I do agree with what you're saying, that I think AI is incredibly good at building relationships. We've had people ask our AI out on dates before. You know what I mean? Which you could argue the appropriate level of whether they're a human or not, if a prospect should be
Yeah.
asking a. But regardless, yeah, relationships are being built. Community, though, I agree, is defined as a collection of relationships, right? With common shared interests, morals, values, goals, so on and so forth. And you need multiple parties in order to have that. So inherently, an AI and a person building a relationship is not a community. So
Right.
I agree, for what it's worth, with your take there on that. And no, I personally have not seen AI playing a large role in building community in multifamily. I don't think it's because it can't. I don't think it's because it shouldn't. I just think that I haven't seen that yet, and it's a really interesting topic. Almost AI acting as an arbiter of connecting like-minded individuals in the community.
Well, yeah, and that's, again, my background's operations. I came from that. I know that, there's several stats out there that the more connected someone is to others on the community, that the higher their likelihood is to renew and stay and be a longer term resident, which brings them a higher value to the community, all those things. So I hope, as my operating partners who might be listening to this or hear this, I hope one of the things they heard was, okay, the large language model might be able to develop a relationship and might be able to get you the lease. It's still your job to build the community. It is. That's why we call them communities. It's why they're community managers.
Oh yeah.
And I've been a big advocate. Granted, I'm alone in this, but I've been a big advocate for years now that we need to stop calling it the leasing office and call it the resident services office. Like you do a lot more than just lease to the folks that are living at your properties.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just
A big, a big tagline at NurtureBoss is we strive to put the humanity back into AI. And what we mean is what you just said, Andrew, is that we think that our job is to free people up to do what they do best, which is build meaningful relationships, right? And that community that you're talking about. So I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for the validation. My last question, and then I'll open to anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure we do talk about. But my last question is, and this is a broad one, but what are people getting wrong with AI right now in multifamily? Like, what are the things that you hear that you just want to stand up and go, stop it? Like, just scream, stop it. What are we doing wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I think that what we're doing wrong is basically parroting hype, if that makes sense. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is that there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of news articles, there's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of memes, and you can repeat those all you want. It doesn't make them more real. It doesn't make you more of an expert, right? The people that are making a big difference are the people in the space that are grinding and finding ways to implement solutions in a way that solve real pain points. So what I think we're getting wrong, and it's not unique to multifamily, is that we're spending too much time talking about hype and not enough time talking about real world implementation of solutions that are solving problems, and putting in the footwork and putting in the sweat equity to, as a community, as an industry, build out the framework to create an environment where it's possible to continue to make advances there and stay on the cutting edge, like Tyler was telling you on his panel, right? We want to stay on that cutting edge that we've been able to kind of sneak up on after all these years of being behind.
So you've mentioned something a couple times that I want to dig in just a little bit more on, and I want to do this from the perspective of the operating partners that are out there, the ones who are saying, you just mentioned that you want to focus in on the real pain points. How can an operator or an owner of real estate answer the question, is this a pain point that AI might be legitimately able to help me solve? What are the natures of those pain points that would indicate, okay, there might be a solution out there that's going to help us with this, versus others that are just like, I don't care what the AI is, it's not solving that for you. Can you categorize that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that an example of something that AI can't solve is if you're getting a lot of feedback from your residents about their physical experience on the property, right? You can't get AI that's going to remember to, keep your gym clean and your landscaping organized, right? Like that's an actual physical experience that residents are having that they're unhappy with in this example, that you need to find solutions for outside of technology, right? That you're able to solve. So, if a person can do it, AI can do it. That's not true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like AI can't cut your lawn. So I think identifying if technology can actually, if it's a problem that technology can actually solve is a great first step. The other piece of it is understanding if the pain points are coming from a lack of time or bandwidth to accomplish tasks. That's obviously a good indicator for AI and automation, assuming those tasks fit into that bucket that we've talked about initially. Understanding the pain points that are directly affecting your NOI, for a lack of not to always bring it back to NOI, but like if
No, that's what this industry does. You can bring it back to
right,
NOI. Absolutely.
right. So like if vacancy loss is absolutely hurting your bottom line, right? Then you start saying, okay, well, why are we, losing so much money to vacancy loss? Is it because of a low turnover rate, or is it because it takes us forever to fill a vacant unit, or identifying that. And then you say, okay, does technology exist out there to help me solve this problem and automate these tasks? So I think with a hyper focus on the ability to automate manual workflows, that typically falls into the bucket of like, yes, okay, AI. And then there's the other side of like, no, this is a human task that needs a human to solve it. That it's obviously, don't waste time trying to find AI that's going to do those things for you.
Yeah, you brought up two really interesting things in there. Number one, the way I've always kind of expressed that is, AI can't turn a wrench. It's like at some point robotics might be able to turn a wrench for you, but right now AI can't turn a wrench. To your point of,
Right.
does a human need to do this? But then when you also went down to, okay, well, why do I have a vacancy problem? You just described the issue that I think the orchestration level that you described earlier will eventually solve for multifamily, or at least give insights into, okay, here's what we're seeing with the vacancy issue. Here are the potential contributors to it. Here are the trends we're seeing in those potential contributors. This is the one that's out of whack. Again, I don't know of anybody who's there yet at this point. I think we're a ways from that, but that's where I think it can eventually go.
Yeah.
And that's right. The asset management will finally truly be in the fray as well.
I agree. I think that idea of bringing AI into more of the asset management side, to use a phrase used earlier, like download the regional's brain, right, into that AI agent or orchestration layer of mini agents, is exciting and inevitable. I would say it's absolutely inevitable.
Awesome. I guess some people love that. Some people will be scared to death of that, but that's okay. That's the world we live in these days.
Yeah.
So I guess, Jacob, anything else that we didn't talk about today that you think the industry should be talking about when it comes to artificial intelligence?
I think that, and you tell me if I do a good job articulating this, because this just popped in my head and I haven't.
Sure.
It's very unpracticed here, so
Love it.
I'm happy to dig in if it doesn't make sense. But I think that it's really important for everyone to start understanding what they actually need to know and don't need to know about AI. And what I mean by that is that we shouldn't expect everybody to be experts in AI technology, how AI works, what is AI, be able to have an in-depth conversation around large language models and, whatever. I think that you should focus on identifying how AI impacts you directly, and are you informed in a way that allows you to make smart choices about that direct impact AI has on you, and don't get distracted by all the noise that's outside of that. That would be like my thing that I would hope everybody would start doing, thinking about, and focusing on, is AI takes over the world and will continue to do so. But tell me, Andrew, did that make sense, or is that too vague?
No, it absolutely made sense. And, again, to put it in kind of operators terms, it's, as a community manager, you don't necessarily need to know exactly how the electrical system on your building works, but you better know the basics and how it affects you. And I think what you described is kind of the same thing with artificial intelligence, is like, you don't need to know absolutely how a neural network is actually formed and how it works. But if you're going to do behavioral modeling and do predictive modeling, or if you're going to be the benefit of behavioral modeling and predictive modeling out of that, you better understand how it actually sits on top of a database and how important it is to make sure the data that you're putting in your source property management system is as accurate and timely as possible. I think it's a really good. So to that end, though, do you have resources that are not so overly technical that a regional manager can go get a good education on the basics of the types of AIs and how they're used, so they can have a meaningful conversation with the nurture bosses of the world?
Yeah, good question. So I've been trying to create some of this content. There's a series of videos that you can find on LinkedIn that we're calling AI shorts that are 2 to 3 minute long videos that are like, let's talk about this topic that everyone's talking about, and let's talk about it very quickly in a way that doesn't use any words that you have to Google. You know what I mean? There's no words that you have to look up in this quick explanation. So in NurtureBoss and personally, my plan is to continue to put out those AI shorts to kind of cover these topics quickly in a bite-sized format. There's also a lot of really good innovators and thought leaders out there on the space. I'm going to say his last name wrong maybe, but Jonathan Buckaloo is a really good example. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn, go follow
Totally
him.
agree. I will totally agree with that.
So, and he does a good job, and I've never met him. I'm just a fan like a lot of people are, but he does a really good job of framing it contextually in a way that matters to you, and is directly impactful on your day to day versus just being hype, right? There's other AI influencers in the multifamily space that are very hype driven, and there's not actual meat to get off the bone there. And Jonathan's a good example of someone who's not that, who's providing a ton of value and hyper focus. So, hopefully those resources are helpful.
Absolutely. And I'll put Jonathan's profile in the show notes. And actually, I've invited him on the podcast. We're just working on a date to do this. So he'll be a guest here sometime soon as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely listen to that one.
Yes, he is one that I'm like, okay, that's where we should be going. That's the direction that in my not so humble opinion, we need to be going. So I'm glad you called him out on that. Jacob, I really appreciate you coming on and having the conversation with me. Where can people reach you, get a hold of you, learn more about either NurtureBoss or kind of further a conversation with you?
Yeah, good question. So obviously the website, nurtureboss.io. LinkedIn is a great resource as well. You can reach out to me directly, jacob@nurtureboss.io. I love talking about this stuff. I like making resources that are valuable and that are objective and not, just free. Here's information, like not related to NurtureBoss at all, like that. Running a head-to-head AI pilot guide as an example. We also have a free GEO audit tool where you can put in your property website, get a PDF report generated by AI, spit out that will tell you how your site's doing for GEO. So we're always trying to give resources out, and I want to know what people need. So let me know, and we'll build it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Jacob. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for joining me here on the Apartment Jedi podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, the best way you can support this platform is to like, subscribe, and share the channel on the social media platform of your preference. Mine happens to be LinkedIn. Also, head over to apartmentjedi.com for more content and links to the full library of our episodes. And lastly, if you know of a guest that I should be having a conversation with, or if you are someone I should be having a conversation with, apartmentjedi.com is where you can find the link to submit your story for consideration. I promise I look at all of the submissions and I respond to every submission. So until next time, I appreciate you and your time and attention. Make it a great day.